I'm Mrs. Hyman. I'm sure Mrs. Bell Peters has told you that I'd be here to talk about addiction. And I just want to start off by saying, how many of you know of somebody that has a substance use disorder, an addiction problem? Okay. How many of you have known somebody that has overdosed? Okay. Unfortunately, I'm seeing more and more hands go up lately. I thought I would have to teach my child about the world, but it turns out that I have to teach the world about my son. And that is what I'm here to do today, is talk about my son Andrew, who I lost to an overdose this past summer on August 9th. As you'll be able to see by the pictures, Andrew lived a similar life to what you are all growing up with: family, friends, holidays, sports, vacations, etc. And I put together some pictures so you can kind of get to know and see who Andrew was. Right there, 1988 to 2016, he was 27 years old. I'll show you pictures from when he was younger all the way up until he was 27 here. I'll stop and I'll kind of go back and forth, but I'll begin with when his addiction started. The pictures will kind of show you his younger years. His addiction started experimenting in high school. I didn't find out till later that he took his first opiate when he was in high school. Kind of a cute picture today, especially. This is Andrew, and this is his little sister Katie, who she just turned 25. Today is her birthday. As you can see, he was very, very gentle all along. He had an excellent work ethic. He worked at a golf course and when he was in high school, and really enjoyed that. As far as high school, he wasn't the stellar student, but he definitely enjoyed cars and girls and having a good time. He did want to go on to college, and he did. He did get started. He wanted to be a social studies teacher, and he went to University of Akron. He spent 2 years at Akron, and then he transferred to Kent Geauga campus. And he kind of switched majors. He went into psychology. He really wanted to help others down the road as far as with addiction problems. So he struggled with college, and I know at that time he had dabbled in the drugs as well. In 2012, he was dating a girl, and at the time we were all living in Chardon, where he grew up, and there was late at night, and I'm hearing all this commotion, and it turns out, you know, the girlfriend is outside his bedroom door and saying that, you know, like a lot of drama going on. And I said, you know, why don't you guys just wait till the morning, you know, discuss this at another time. And she said, he's in there, he's got a gun, he's trying to kill himself. And so we were able to get in the room and get the gun away from him. And it was at that time that I found out that he was involved with heroin. That was in May of 2012. It wasn't until November of 2012 that we were able to convince him to go to rehab. He went to Glen Bay, about a half hour from Chardon. And, you know, I think it was one of those, well, you either go to rehab or, you know, you're not living here kind of thing. You know, what are your choices? So he ended up going to rehab for 30 days. And I remember walking out of there going, oh, you know, this is it. This is the answer. This is our fix. And little did I know how much more we had to go through. He was there for the 30 days, and then every weekend the parents and the family would come and have meetings, and you would meet face to face, and you'd be doing different groups, and trying for us to understand and for them to understand what it does to the family. Here's my boy. It was a 12-step program, and if any of you are familiar with the 12-step AA program, he never really bought into it. Andrew never really bought into it that it was a disease. He thought it was all something that he could control. And as I learned, you know, it is in fact a disease. He loved baseball growing up, played a lot of that. Unfortunately, he didn't pursue that as going into high school, and I think once he got into high school and he was working and, you know, began smoking weed and that's kind of when it all started. That's his older sister and younger sister. So similar pictures, I'm sure, what you guys all have as far as growing up, playing paintball. That's his sister, older sister, when he went to homecoming as a freshman. So anyway, he went through the rehab, and unfortunately it didn't do what I thought it would do. And so what they wanted him to do is go to 30 meetings in 30 days with the AA program. And that's hard to do, and when you're trying to work and put it all together. So, and it was even harder to do when you're not really a firm believer of the AA program. He did find another program called Smart Recovery, which was cognitive-based therapy, and he seemed to like that, and he would go to that once in a while. He was working at Volkswagen at the time, selling cars, always loved cars, and he ended up, you know, when you're need the money to get the drug, you're going to do whatever you can. I mean, I remember, you know, putting my purse under my bed, and, you know, my daughter's always like, you know, trying to, you know, keep her personal things safe, you know, because once in a while something would go missing. And, you know, you feel bad, but that's who you kind of point the finger at. And he ended up stealing some tires from Volkswagen, and of course, you know, he lost his job at that point because when he went to rehab the first time, he was working for Volkswagen, and you know, they were okay with him going for 30 days and getting the help, but then you come back, you know, I understand that from an employer's perspective, they're not going to keep you. So after that, I remember that was November was his first rehab, and then maybe like February he stole the tires, so we knew he's back into the drugs and that. Again, said, you know, what are we going to do? You need to go to rehab. You go to rehab, you got to go through detox for the first few days. So went to rehab again, same thing for 30 days. He came out, he was going to do what they call an IOP program, which is kind of like an outpatient program that you go to for like 3 or 4 days a week for a couple hours at a time. And I thought, all right, he's not working, obviously has lost the job. You know, what can we do? I thought, all right, you can paint the garage, you got to stay busy, you know, your mind's got to be busy. So he helped me that Sunday clean out the garage, and I bought some paint, and I went to sleep that night, and I heard him snoring in the morning when I woke up, and I thought, wow, he's really getting a good night's rest. It's been a while since he's been in his own bed. And then his breathing seemed like it was more labored, and I almost texted him because it was almost, you know, I kind of thought it was, you know, kind of funny. My mind never went to thinking he was overdosing. I went to work. My daughter, Katie, my younger daughter, had lived with me at the time, and she had a little girl, and she went through some training to work in a group home, and it turned out that they said whenever there is breathing that is not typical, something is wrong. So she was able to work her way into the room, and Andrew had overdosed and was really close to dying. And they had to she called, 911. She got her daughter to the neighbor's house, and called me here at school, and I drove to the hospital, and got there, and that was his worst overdose other than the one that took his life. He was all intubated and hooked up on all kinds of machines, and he was in ICU for like 3 or 4 days. And then we think, okay, now where do we go from here? I tried taking pictures of him and showing them to him when he, got out of that state. And so, we tried everything we could. So then I'm fortunately blessed with a really great family, and my brothers were like, well, we've got to find him another rehab. We kind of felt like Glen Bay didn't work. Now where do we go? So we found a place in Illinois, like Peoria, Illinois. And when he got out of the hospital, instead of bringing him home, because we thought, what happens if he has something hidden or whatever, we took him to my brother's house, and we stayed the night there, and the next day we went to Peoria, Illinois. And as it was a long way, and we wanted him to have more than 30 days there, and turned out that he did not like it at all. And as much as I think that they got a real good handle on maybe the psychology end of it, like they really diagnosed him with anxiety, and was able to have him have that dual diagnosis of anxiety and the substance use disorder. So he hated it, and he signed himself out, which you can do, and got enough money together to take a Greyhound bus back here to Cleveland. And I was just, now what do you do? So he ended up coming back here, and I said, I can't have you back here. I was just trying to what are you going to do next? Well, a friend that was from AA went and picked him up and took him to a sober living house in Cleveland. And, he was there for a little while, but they had a meeting, like a AA meeting, where they had parents, like where I am at now, talking about how they lost their son to an overdose. So I went to this meeting, and Andrew was to the left of me, and my boyfriend to the right of me at the time. I could tell that these parents are speaking about losing their child to an overdose, and I know my son right next to me is in a sober house, and I know he's high, and I'm just like, oh, gosh. Well, it turned out they found out by the next day, and they kicked him out. And I said, okay, we're coming back down. I said, I'll drive you to a homeless shelter, And it's really hard as a family to be able to set your boundaries, to love them, number one, set your boundaries. And at the time, I had my daughter and her daughter living with us, and that created a lot of tension, obviously. So I was real thankful for a buddy of his, Josh, who came to the rescue and said, come on, you can come home with me. And he lived out in Lake County, and he was a good friend. He wasn't one that did the drugs. And so, we're back to the drawing board. Now what do we do? So my brothers said, well, let's look into like a long-term program. And we found one out in Colorado that was not too far from Aspen. And, we're trying to convince Andrew to go to Colorado. I think most of you would love to just go to Colorado. And he was like, it took some talking to, and it was, okay, I'll go. So it cost $45,000 for just 3 months. And my brothers, I have 3 brothers, each did like $15,000 of that. Because my one brother said, how do you put a price on life? And you don't, but if you don't have it, you can't do that either. So he ended up going out there, and it was really nice. It wasn't such a lockdown facility. It was like a house with a lot of other guys. And they would go whitewater rafting, they'd go hiking. They were trying to get them to enjoy other things in life other than the drugs. And he really liked it out there. He really ended up liking it a lot. I went out to visit him. This was a homecoming picture the following year. This is his younger sister, Kate, who we just saw in the baby picture that it's her birthday today. This is Marley, who he was so close to. That's my daughter Katie's daughter, so that would be his niece. They always said in AA you have to have a higher power, and it could be God, it could be whatever you want it to be. And Andrew would always say his higher power was Marley, that he had such love for her and put her up so high on a pedestal, and she's a sweetheart of a girl. But this is up not too easy to see. We were out in Colorado. So we went out there to visit him, and she is 7 now. So he had lived, or Marley and Katie had lived with us up until Marley was like 6 years old maybe. So, he was a very important part of her life. And then Andrew ended up trying to stay out there with a couple other guys who were getting out of rehab, and I don't know all the details. That didn't work out. He went to Denver to live with a friend for a while, and let's see. So he ended up flying home then for Thanksgiving, and at Thanksgiving time, I don't think he had yet served his time yet for stealing those tires, and so then there was a warrant out for his arrest. And I was begging him, I was having Thanksgiving at my house, I'm like, please just turn yourself in before Thanksgiving, serve your time, and you'll be done. And he didn't do it until after Thanksgiving, which he ended up serving a couple of days for. So then he, other times that would happen, I think he just stayed with us, and he took my car to a meeting, because when he was out in California or out in Colorado, his car, he damaged or totaled several cars. Unfortunately, he never hurt anybody by doing it, but he had a real nice car from Volkswagen, a Passat that, he had all spiffed up and everything. And he had gotten in an accident with it. And instead of using the insurance money to take care of it, he thought he'll take the insurance money and give it to his friend who could fix it. Well, the friend really never fixed it the way it should have been, but being an addict, Andrew thought, well, if I could only pay him so much, I could have the other money for drugs. And they eventually had to come get the car, and he ended up owing probably an additional $7 grand on it. So financially, it's really tough. This is his other niece, Reagan, who that picture was when he was at my daughter's wedding with Reagan. And as you could see, he's just a very gentle soul. This was my granddaughter, my other niece, Madison, who was just born in June. And I was happy that he was able to meet her as well. So there are different things that happen. I remember he took my car and he says, oh, Mom, I'm going to a meeting. And of course, okay, you can have my car to go to a meeting. I would, you could drive yourself crazy. I would look at how many miles were on the car when he left, how many miles when he came back. I mean, you could drive yourself crazy with all that stuff trying to monitor it. But in the end, it really doesn't do any good. And I remember getting a call from State Highway Patrol saying that Andrew was off to the side of the road, and he needed to be picked up, and this officer was kind of saying, hey, I think he's got a problem, and he didn't give him a DUI. It was my car. Ended up bringing him back home. He was nodding off. I took video of him nodding off to show him the next morning again what he looked like. you know, trying to do whatever I could to show him what we see from our eyes. Like I said, the challenges of keeping a family intact were not easy. You know, his sister Katie would get real mad at him, and rightfully so. I can't say that I ever found any paraphernalia around the house as far as a needle or anything like that. But his relationships were very strained with a lot of people, his sisters, with, you know, friends. He lost a lot of friends along the way, or they set their boundaries, let's put it that way. In January of 2014, he didn't have a car at the time, or license, or one of the two, and he got a friend of his to drive him to Cleveland to get some more dope. And I didn't know that, and when I came home, he was gone, and I said to Katie, I said, hey, do you know where Andrew is? And she says, oh yeah, he went with, you know, this one guy. She goes, oh, don't worry, he's okay with him, you know, because Katie knew a lot of his friends. And I said, okay. Well, it turned out that he talked this guy into taking him somewhere, and I don't think he fully told the right story, but he was able to get his dope. On the way back, he was overdosing, and they had to call the paramedics, and again, he was in the hospital for another overdose. Now, what they do give people who are on opiates, the Narcan spray that they can give them. I've been recently trained in that. I wasn't back when Andrew was living with me. But he had that. He wasn't in the hospital as long as he was the first time, maybe 2 or 3 days. And I remember he was giving the doctor a really hard time. And so when he got out, that was like January 1st. He had gotten a job at Heinen's. And so he didn't have a car, so I would have to drive him to work, bring him back. You know, I never wanted to put that on his sister to do or anybody else. I felt like, you know, that was something that I had to do. So then in April, his grandfather, my dad, lent him money to buy a car. Gives you an idea who Andrew is. He loved his shoes. He was just loved his shoes, loved his cars. This was the one that my dad gave him money to buy. This was his Passat that he ended up owing quite a bit of money on. I think he just ended up selling that one. I don't think that one was damaged at all. And no, that wasn't his. That was our neighbor's car, a Lamborghini. But he always had such a love for cars. He liked his bling. I wear his ring now. Red Bull, he liked his Red Bull. You know, he was a true addict. You know, one was never enough. One cup of really strong coffee is never enough either. It always just had to be more and more. So he was really glad when he got that black car, and my dad lent him money for that. And so he was going to the Smart Recovery meetings a little bit. And I remember even bringing him back from a Smart Recovery meeting in Menor, and we went over the cemetery that my family's kind of our cemetery. And he goes, well, what are you doing now? I go, well, he goes, is this some kind of scare tactic? I go, no, Andrew, this is, you know, where my mom is buried. I said, and if you don't stop doing what you're doing, I said, you're going to end up here. And I said, you know, yeah, I didn't know what else to do. I don't know what else to say. I said, and I'm not walking all over the cemetery. You'll be buried right here by Grandma. And I just, you know, was trying every tactic that I possibly could. So he ended up leaving Heinen's, and he got a job at Danny Boy's as a waiter, which he liked doing. And then that following December, he ended up getting in an accident with the car that my Dad gave him the money to purchase, and totaled that car. Fortunately, he was T-boned, but nobody was hurt. And that was like a year later. That was like December 27th. And I know prior to that, he was really struggling, trying to get clean. Like that last year, he was really trying hard. He was really, you know, he didn't want to be that way. You know, you never want to be that way. But I think he was really realizing, you know, I need some help. And even before Christmas, I'm like, well, we'll look into, you know, finding a doctor, finding like that. They have a Vivitrol shot, which you can get, and it'll last for 30 days. And that blocks any of the opiates that you put into your system. And I said, you know, let's try that. We ended up finding a doctor. And here, it turned out the doctor was the same doctor that he hated a year ago when he was in the hospital. So it just kind of showed me that he was more ready and he was more mature, ready to deal with this. And at that time, he had his license suspended and only had driving privileges for work or for going to meetings or doctor's appointments. And he felt horrible about losing that black car because he loved cars and he knew how important, you know, what my dad had done for him. So, of course, he lost his job at Danny Boy's after that one too, because he was supposed to be in at work, and that never happened. So then in January, he was able to meet with the doctor. He was able to get on the Vivitrol shot, and he was meeting with the doctor, and he was really doing well in the program. And the doctor, you know, was going to have him complete some classes because he had a 2-year associate's degree in psychology, and he wanted to, you know, help other people with addiction problems. So there we are again without a car. And I'm like, now what do we do? He goes, Mom, all I need is like a little Cavalier, you know, something, just a beater with the heater to get me to and from work. So we went out, we got him a $1,500 car, which died in like 5 weeks. That was a waste. So then I ended up giving him my Corolla, and I got a new car. But this was a trip that I had taken Andrew on. It was a cruise to Jamaica. He always wanted to go to Jamaica. He's a big Bob Marley nut, so if you come to the cafe and I got Bob Marley on, that's the reason. And that was probably about 6 or 7 years ago. And it was a really nice trip. Memories were really good. This is when I went out to Colorado to see him, and we went whitewater rafting. And this was when he walked me down the aisle for my daughter's wedding. And I was married this summer, and this is my side of the family here with Andrew and my daughters and their spouses, and my husband's side of the family. And Andrew was so happy for me when I got engaged and so happy for me when I got married. I thought one of the best days is, I said, Andrew, he lived with me. I said, where do you want to live? Do you want to move in with Rob and I? Do you want to live with my dad? You know, what do you want to do? And he says, I want to get a place of my own. And I thought, all right, you know, that's fine. He's 27, I respect that. And he's like, well, all I can afford is what's in Euclid. And I go, well, I grew up in Euclid, and it's not what it is today. I said, well, you're not getting one in Euclid. So at the time, he was working for La Maffa Party Center. He was a ballroom captain, so he always had to wear a tux, and they really treated him well and took him under their wing, and I think gave him a lot of support and really helped his self-esteem. And meanwhile, he's on this Vivitrol shot, you know, and making some strides. And then, and the Vivitrol shot costs like $1,200, so, you know, it took a while for it to be covered by insurance. but eventually it was. And then he was on my insurance, and at the time, Aurora was cutting off insurance for older children, like between 26 and 28. I said, well, we just have to find you another insurance. You can't be the type that'll be without insurance. And he said, you know, Mom, I just don't like the way this Vivitrol makes me feel. He goes, I feel so empty. And I could never understand how that feeling was, to feel so empty. And I said, you know, I was always trying to encourage him to, you know, get involved in, you know, other groups or, you know, whatever he liked to do. And so, like, he always told me how much he loved me and how much I was appreciated. And bottom line, there's nothing else that matters in life. I mean, I know I don't have my son, but bottom line is I know I loved him, and he knows that, and nothing else matters. This is my father, who, that was a hard day going over to his house to tell him about my son, because he would go over there all the time and help him with his landscaping or his work and help him out. This was at our wedding. He had 2 tattoos. One is "Only God Can Judge Me," and the other is "Forever Young." Forever Young, Rod Stewart's song. I gave my kids all a song when they were born, and that was Andrew's, you know. Looking back, I think maybe God knew more than I knew, but so he got that tattoo of "Forever Young" on his wrist. And before I talk about this page, I'll kind of go back to August 8th, which it was. I had a meeting here at school for the special ed department, and it was a beautiful day, a real sunny day, and I said to some of the ladies I work with, I said, hey, why don't you come on over to the house? We'll spend the afternoon swimming. And I got a call from Andrew, and he sounded so good. I said, Andrew, you sound so good. I go, do you think, like, he was on Xanax for anxiety, which was prescribed. I think he tried probably getting more than he should have had, because it was never enough being that addict. And then they also put him on like an antidepressant, and I said, how is, you know, maybe the antidepressant is helping. He goes, yeah, he goes, but I think I need a little more. I'm like, you know, it was just never enough. The coffee, the Red Bull, it was never enough. So he sounded great, and I said, all right, you know. And then about an hour and a half later, I'm actually in the pool, my phone rings, and I get out of the pool, and it was a missed call by Andrew, and I thought, oh, he probably just butt dialed me. I just talked to him. So I called back, and here a guy from work answered the phone, and he goes, Andrew just passed out, the paramedics are here, I think it's his medicine. And I said, okay, I'll go to the hospital. And, you know, I knew it wasn't his medicine. I knew it had to be, you know, something else. Because let me backtrack to about a little over a week prior to that. I got a call on a Friday morning, and Andrew said, Mom, I just crashed the car. That was the Corolla now that I gave him. He goes, I just hit a fire hydrant. He goes, I need you. Can you come up here? And I said, Andrew, what happened? Are you sober? What's going on? Yeah, Mom, yeah, I was just texting you to have a nice day, you know, and they're really good about telling you what you want to hear. And I said, Andrew, this was one time, I said, I can't be there. I said, I'm watching all the granddaughters. I said, I can't be there. So I ended up going there later that evening and taking him out to dinner, and he was just so depressed. And I said, and he did confess to me, you know, that he did go off the Vivitrol shot, and he did, you know, some of the heroin. And when he wanted to go off the Vivitrol shot because he didn't like the way it made him feel, you know, that made me nervous, because that was like my safety net, knowing that that was his blocker. And I said, well, you know, you're working with a team of doctors, a psychiatrist, a counselor. I said, those are your professionals. And they said, well, they're going to save me one of the shots, and if I have an urge, I can go in and get the shot. Well, he never went in to get the shot. So he had crashed the car. It was another DUI. It was less than 6 months. It was like 1 day shy of him getting off probation from the courts. So, you know, we looked into getting an attorney. He had crashed a car when he was in Colorado too. I had to get an attorney and work from Colorado because he had borrowed his friend's car. He didn't have a license. He didn't have insurance. So, you know, it just does not make you think right, makes you make a lot of poor choices. And so he, you know, I went to the hospital, and my prayer always on the way to the hospital is, Lord, if it's your will, he's yours. If not, give me the strength to know what to do next. And so I got to the hospital. It's just kind of amazing, you know, he was out of there in 2 hours, which is my biggest pet peeve right now, that, you know, they gave him the Narcan, he was doing fine, and the nurse said, well, you know, a lot of people come in your state and they never make it out of here, they make it down to the morgue. Andrew, what are you going to do, you know, when you get that urge? And he tells you everything you want to hear. Well, I'm going to call my mom, I'm going to, you know, I'm like, okay, you know, and so he ended up saying, Mom, can you put some music on? I go, I can't in the hospital here, you know, it wouldn't work. And we get in the car, he's like, 2 hours, we were just let go. And now I think back on it, and that is such a small amount of time to treat an addict. In my opinion, they should be in the hospital for 72 hours and have to have the right connections made before they're allowed out. I mean, I don't think if somebody came in and had a massive heart attack, they're going to say, okay, you can go now. And, you know, that I recently just heard my daughter works with a girl. She lost her brother from Menor just a week or so ago, and same hospital. He was in, he was out, and later had overdosed. So here it was a Monday, and I said, Andrew, we go to the doctor on Wednesday. Now you know you need the Vivitrol shot. The thing is with the Vivitrol shot is you need like 7 days clean before you can get the shot. It was Monday evening, we go to the doctor on Wednesday, like, you can do this, Andrew. And so we get in the car and he's like, Mom, can you turn some music on? I'm like, oh, what are you, high? What's going on? He goes, no, Mom, you can like music anytime. I'm like, all right, put the music on. Took him to his apartment. He ended up getting a really nice apartment up by La Mafa, and he ended up getting a roommate, not anybody he knew directly, but like indirectly. And he never shared with his roommate his addiction problems that he had. So he said, Mom, you want to come in? I go, no, I'm just tired. I'm going to go home. So on the way home, we were talking and about, you know, just anything and everything, and just telling him, you know, same old talks, Andrew, you know what you have to do, have faith, and, you know, take one day at a time. And then when I got home, I was texting him that night, and the Olympics were on, and we're just texting back and forth about the Olympics and that. And so then the next morning, I knew he had to work, and I got up, and my husband runs a basketball camp at our house, so it was girls' camp going on everywhere, girls all over the place. And so I texted Andrew, and I said, I sent him a picture of Wizard of Oz, you know, the Wicked Witch and the flying monkeys. And the caption said, I hope it's not going to be one of these weeks or I'll have to send out the flying monkeys. And I sent him the text, and I didn't hear back from him. And I thought, all right. And I tried calling him, and he didn't pick up. And I thought, well, maybe he's at work. I thought he should have been at work by then. So I called work, and they said, well, he's not here yet, but we'll have him give you a call when he gets home, when he gets there. Well, right then I was like, okay, you know, he didn't leave his phone at the apartment. Something's wrong. So I ended up getting in the car. I was on my way. I texted his roommate and I said, hey, have you seen Andrew this morning? And he said, no. He goes, but I heard him snoring. And right then and there I knew that if he was snoring, that's first sign of shutdown. And so his roommate ended meeting me at the apartment. And when I got there, his roommate got there before I did, and he said, don't come in here. He goes, I've called the paramedics. Don't come in here. I'm not finding a pulse. And so he, you know, he was gone. By the time the paramedics got there, they went in. They weren't in there very long. That he already had passed. And, you know, that quickly, when I got the toxology report, it wasn't heroin, it was fentanyl, pure fentanyl. So people don't know what they're getting. And people are putting fentanyl in other drugs now, you know. And I will continue tomorrow. Do you want me to just, oh, no, if I got a little bit more to go here. Is that okay? You sure? Okay. So, you know, that's a main thing to be aware of. You know, fentanyl can be put in anything, and just a little bit of it is going to kill you. So when it got to be time for his funeral, we were putting pictures together, and I said to my daughters at my daughter's house, I said, all I have to say is, I said, he better send us a rainbow in the next couple of days, because I'm a big believer in rainbows. Believe that there's God's promise to that. So we were walking into the funeral home the morning of, before the church service, and as we're walking in, it's beautiful sunny skies, and my daughter looks out the back window and she goes, oh my God, Mom, she goes, it's raining out. She goes, there's got to be a rainbow. So we went out and there was a big rainbow, which just kind of gave me a lot of strength, you know, for the rest of the day. And then another day, I had my granddaughter Marley. It was a beautiful day in November, and I had to go to a wedding that day, go to the store, get a wedding card. And I was babysitting her, and she's like, Grammy, can we get a balloon? And I'm like, no, we're not getting any balloons. Get a card and let's get out of here. I said, I want to go back and wanted to do some hiking on our property. And so we ended up going down, and as soon as we got down the hill, there was this balloon there that said miss you on it. And, you know, I believe, you know, somehow Andrew put that there. I mean, I've never seen a balloon like that to begin with, and there was no other garbage around, just this balloon. So I know he's with us, you know, bottom line. It's a different relationship. I can't hug him anymore, but, you know, I still talk to him, and I know he's leaving us signs all the time. But tomorrow I'll come back and we'll have more of an open discussion. So give you guys a little time to think and bring back questions. All right, thank you. I'm back today, and hopefully you guys had a little time to think about what I talked about yesterday. And what I want to go over today is, I guess I'm trying to really break that stigma of what a lot of people think about who addicts are. And so I found these quotes online that are really good. The first one is, the opposite of addiction is connection. And addicts will often alienate themselves from friends and family. And what you try to do is try to stay connected with them. The next one is that it isn't a choice, it is a disease, as you guys have learned about in this class. And that's really important to know, that it is a disease. Until you have loved someone who abuses substances, don't judge the family's choices. The line between enabling and supporting is blurry. I know it's so tough to be in that situation, to know when to say, okay, you can't come back here unless you go to rehab. Some people just completely you know, kick their children out. They end up on the streets. And sometimes they do, you know, hit the all-time low and bounce back, and other times they don't. Until you have loved someone who abuses substances, don't, oh, I just did that one, sorry. It's not necessarily because the parent was a bad parent, or the child, in my case, is a bad person. I did not raise, you know, my son, you know, I always preached not to do the drugs. Let's see. Addiction is not the entirety of me. I am me. I am not just my addiction. There is a lot of other stuff to love. So you don't want to just look at the person as an addict. You know, my son had so many good qualities as far as, you know, being very loving and caring and had a great sense of humor, a great heart. People who suffer from addiction do not choose to be that way, nor do they have to let it define them. Addiction is so much more common and pervasive an issue than society thinks. I wish people saw the time that addicts spend alone, thinking about everything they've done every time they've lied and stole. I know my son, he was in recovery, you know, had a lot of really low times of, you know, a low self-esteem for the fact that, you know, the things that he had done over the last few years. My addiction does not define who I am or who I will be. One of the attorneys that we worked with that was out in Colorado, when Andrew had wrecked one of the cars without a license, without insurance, turned out that he was a former addict. And he was able to move on, and he became an attorney. So recovery is possible. It's not a matter of willpower or a lack of moral compass. I think my father, who's 89, you know, a few years ago, you know, would think more it was more of a willpower thing. And I guess I did too in the beginning. You know, you just don't do it. Well, it totally changes your brain. It's easier said than done. So it's not a lack of a moral compass. I mean, he was brought up with the right morals. We do recover. There are plenty of people out there that do recover. I went to a group, I'm on a Facebook page for parents of addicted children, and there was a meeting in Euclid that I went to a few weeks ago, and they had a girl, there were a lot of parents there, and there were two young adults there that were in recovery, and the parents would say, why do they even do it if you know it's going to, you know, there's a chance that it can kill you. Why are you going to do that? And the one girl said, sometimes you just pray that you're going to die because they're at such a low point that they just think that, you know, they have sunken so low that they feel that there's no way out. And that hit me really hard, you know, that, you know, it's nothing we can comprehend because our mind isn't there. But for my son or other addicts to be able to think that way. I am not the face of my addiction. Sometimes you honestly don't realize what you're doing and who you're hurting until you're looking back months later. I wish people could understand the suffocating guilt. Just because I am or was an addict doesn't make me a bad person. Deep down inside, we are wonderful, loving people. wish people would not judge others. Some have no idea what is going on in their lives. The public needs more education on addiction. People need to know how it starts, what it does to every aspect of your life, how to get or give help to an addict, and what recovery is like for an addict. It goes deeper than the substance. A lot of addicts, alcoholics are the most sensitive, caring, and intelligent people you'll ever meet. And I could say that my son was very sensitive. He had a really hard time. He had lost his grandmother and his grandfather. He had a very hard time. His father was, who he had an estranged relationship with for many years, was supposedly diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And he was able to make some amends with his father. And at that time, I was trying to look into anticipatory grief because he was having such a hard time knowing that his father was going to die. And he said, you know, he would help take care of him and everything. Long story short, you know, that was maybe last spring. He wasn't supposed to last till September. He's still living, and my question is, I don't even know if he really had the cancer or not. And Andrew was just so overwhelmed with that grief. I think that had a big part of him going back into his addiction. It's not about willpower. There is hope for us one day at a time. And good people sometimes make bad choices. Not every person is bad people because they have a drug problem. So, So I obviously miss him so much, but when I think of his memories, I feel blessed. I was on Facebook last night, and one of his friends had posted something that Andrew had posted a while ago, and he said, I really miss this guy. And I'm like, oh, I miss him more. And we were just talking back and forth, and it's so nice. You know, if you know of anybody, if you've got a friend or something, you know, always reach out to that parent. You know, it's better to remind them of a memory than not to say anything at all. So you guys have had a little time to think about what I talked about, and now I just kind of want to open it up for any kind of questions, discussion, and don't be shy.
What's your thoughts on this?
What's going through your head right now? I knew I should have brought cookies.
I guess I would have a question from the standpoint, could this happen to you? Could this happen to you? I'll just give you a couple of examples.
Sure.
Of just different things, a little bit different, but addiction. I had a speaker, met a guy buying a car down in Akron, and I was pretty impressed with him as far as the salesperson was concerned. I didn't know anything about him at all. Never met him before. And as we were test driving the car, we had a lot of time to talk, and he indicated to me that he had had a lot of struggles in his life. And he had basically grown up in a home that his parents were crackheads and were selling crack in the neighborhood in Akron. And people were parading in and out all the time. And that's all he knew. And pressure of big time football. And he went back to his old ways. He quit the University of Kentucky, went back to Akron, got himself into that situation of actually selling drugs himself. And of course got caught. And what I didn't know during all of this discussion was that he eventually went to prison because of that. The positive side of this whole situation is that once he got out of prison, he got help. And quite honestly, I would have never known that he was in that situation at all. And he came into this, he had a friend that got him this job at this car dealership in Akron. And he seems like a real straight up guy.
There is help for recovery, absolutely.
There's help for recovery. You got to remember that if you ever get in a situation. The other story here is that I have a neighbor that is in her 60s. She was a closet alcoholic. And consequently, her husband finally said, "We've got to do something about this." And so she did go to rehab for 6 months. And she had to leave her family. And she was through this whole thing. Again, she's home and she seems to be doing fine. But there is help out there. If you ever get in that situation, that you do need help, you've got to try to get it. Or if you recognize one of your friends that really needs help. You know, I look at high school kids as, I don't want to snitch on them. I don't want to say anything about anybody. That's the wrong avenue. If they need help, you need to do those type of things. You need to give them that help by talking to them or going to somebody, your counselor, or whoever it might be, a minister. But they need help, and in the long run, you might save them from the same situation.
Yeah, and I know sometimes jail or prison may help for some people, but it's not the answer, I don't believe, in this situation. I think there's a lot of drugs in jail. There's a lot of drugs that work their way into rehabs or into sober houses. I've met a lot of people along the way, and one of the women that I know, her son went out to California to go to a like a rehab and a detox, to get detox and then stay for rehab. Well, he went out there, they had a meeting, like an AA meeting, that a bunch of the guys ended up walking to. On the way back, they stopped at Walmart. He ended up getting a bottle of cough medicine, drank the whole thing. They couldn't wake him up in the morning. He was comatose, and they ended up having the family to fly out there and to pull the plug. And unfortunately, he died. And, you know, they got back the toxicology reports thinking maybe he got a hold of some heroin or something. It was a bottle of cough medicine. So, you know, I have a real problem with that place even allowing him to go out when he's still in detox. I know when my son was in detox at Glen Bay, you know, you weren't allowed to leave. If you left, then you were not coming back. So, you know, too much freedom in the beginning is definitely not a good thing. And another thing I think I talked about yesterday is when people overdose and, you know, 2 hours they're out of that hospital. You know, they need a solid 72 hours of, you know, what's going on here, get the right people in, because, and I've learned this all through. I didn't, you know this from the get-go. Like, Andrew had overdosed several times. I thought, here we go again, kind of thing. And he was out within 2 hours, thinking we're going to the doctor on Wednesday. You know, you can make it, kind of thing. Well, he didn't. So, questions. Come on, you guys always have questions. You're making me look bad here. There's never a bad question. If you're curious, you know, well, what does a rehab look like? You know, the one they're all different. The one that Andrew was at out in Glen Bay was kind of way out in the boonies. I thought it was kind of a pretty nice facility. It was maybe like a type of college dorm. They had a lake outside. The one that he went to out in Colorado was like a big house, and that was beautiful. And maybe there were 12 guys that lived there. But they're all a little different. Like the one out in Colorado, you know, they gave them the freedom, or, you know, they did things together as groups to get them to enjoy other things other than drugs. So.
See, they're just, go ahead.
Are the rehab centers more centered around like talking and group work, or is it more different activities to help them to get away from the drugs that way, or is it more of a
It's a combination, but I think like Glen Bay was more, you know, okay, read this, and this is kind of your homework, and we're getting in groups and things like that. They did not focus on, you know, yes, they focused on when you get out of here, you've got to change your friends, you know, you've got to change, you know, places and things like that. I thought it was good that Andrew went to Colorado because he was away from here rather than coming back to the same scenarios and the same triggers. But I think it's good that they can focus on doing other things. But, you know, you do whitewater rafting out in Colorado and hiking, you come back to Ohio, you just have to find different things to do. So.
How do they determine that it's time to allow him to leave? Or is there a set period of time?
I think a lot of the rehabs are like 30-day rehabs, and they like to keep them there pretty much that length. But 30 days isn't long enough. Looking back now, oh my gosh, I would think they really need at least a year of rehab, you know, of some type of sober living away from everything. I think two things that I would do would be, you know, lengthen that time in the hospital after an overdose, and definitely lengthen the stay for recovery. But they have to want it, like I said. Anybody could just walk out. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Did you have family members that disagree with how you were handling things?
I didn't. She asked if I had family members that disagreed with how I handled things. Well, I did. I take that back. My daughters. They were, you know, they could see me as a single parent at the time really going through the struggles. I mean, it was a really tough spot to be in because I had my daughter and her daughter living with me, and Andrew, and she would get really mad at her brother for using, again, I never saw any paraphernalia around, but it makes such a combative environment because, Mom, why don't you just kick him out, you know? And, you know, I don't want him around Marley. I don't want this. You know, he's nodding off. I don't want, and he was never abusive. And at the end, he was not stealing things or taking things, and he was working. And so that was a tough spot to be in. Like, who's going to take Andrew? You know, do I have him go live with my father, who's 89? That wasn't fair, you know. And you know, my daughters were just, you know, looking after me, and, you know, we're tired of the, here we go again, here we go again. So they were always glad once he was in rehab. They always agreed with the rehab and that, but and if anybody has any siblings that have, you know, addiction problems, you know, I feel bad for you. I mean, it's not an easy spot to be in. A lot of your energy as a parent goes towards that person who is struggling with addiction.
Do you think that part of the reason why they don't keep people in hospitals for like 72 hours, do you think it's because there's so many of those cases that they don't? Do you think that could be part of the reason?
I think one of probably the biggest reason One of the biggest reasons is she was saying, why don't they keep them in the hospital longer? I think, you know, you can leave a hospital at any time. You know, if you're 18 or over, you can get up and go. And if you're allowed to get up and go and you're an addict, you want to get up and go and get another fix. So I think they really need to make it, you know, federal law, whatever, mandatory that you would have to be in there at least 3 days. I mean, if you walk in there with a, you know, massive heart attack, you're not going to just walk out. I guess you could if you really wanted to, but I think this is such a different type of disease that they're going to have to really come down and enforce it. I think a lot of it is stigma. I think the hospitals are probably, here we go again, you know, EMTs, here we go again, here's another, you know, they get tired of it, and maybe they don't have the understanding that I do on my end. So they are making in Euclid, I know they're making right at the police department, a place for addicts to go if they want to get help without being, you know, judged, and, you know, go on in and say, hey, I need help. You know, maybe somebody would take them to an AA meeting. Maybe they could hook them up for rehab. But they're having it for like a safe place to go. I also know, and I can't say I agree, that some states, one state, can't recall which one it was, that is allowing for safe, a safe spot to take your heroin, which I don't agree with. You know, you go in there and you got clean needles, and it's monitored, okay? And I know another country does that too, but I don't agree with that, you know? So, you had a question?
I was just wondering about like his dad, like if you ever played a picture of
His father, that's a whole story. He never even came to his son's funeral. You know, he was invited to his daughter's wedding about 1.5 years ago, and he didn't come to that. I believe he has his own issues. As far as addiction, a lot of it, you know, you could say, is it in the family? I can't say that anybody in our family is an addict, like, oh, Uncle so-and-so or grandma or grandpa or whatever. I can't say that. I do believe his father has some mental health issues. But yeah, he never, my daughter tried calling him, he wouldn't pick up the phone. The police had to go over there and tell him. And yeah, he didn't show up for the funeral, which I think that was a really tough thing on Andrew and my daughters all these years, to have that non-existent relationship.
Do you think marijuana is a gateway drug, and that legalization will just like push us into more overdoses, more addiction?
I believe, this is my own personal belief, I heard the only gateway drug is nicotine, is what I heard at a conference a while ago. But I believe if you have an addicted personality, it's going, you know, I don't support smoking marijuana. Some states do. Some people can handle it and not move on to anything else. But I believe if you have that addictive personality, it will lead you to that. Alcohol will lead you to that, you know. Andrew went through, back in the day, the DARE program in elementary school, and he said, I remember being so intrigued by what they talked about. Like, he was just so interested in it. And he was a very cautious kid that ended up turning into being quite reckless at the end. You know, the medical, there's a lot of good things to the medical marijuana that, you know, when he was out in Colorado, of course, he liked that end of it. And he always thought, well, I could just smoke weed and not do the other stuff. I don't think in his case he could, you know, because I think he was such a true addict, you know. the coffee, the Red Bull, you know, it was just, everything was to the max.
Let me ask the class by a show of hands, how many think that it's a gateway drug? Marijuana? Just one person?
2.
Two? I'm with you. I think it is. I think it just gets the whole ball started.
I think if it's, yeah, if it's in you, if you're, you know, an addict, if you have parents, if you have somebody in your family, boy, I would be all the more careful to do anything, to drink anything, because you know if it's in your genetics, it could take off from there.
How do you feel peer pressure enters into this?
Oh, I believe peer pressure is probably a big thing. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. I know I went to OU, loved it, had a great time, got an education.
By the way, that was a party salute.
It was, okay. But, you know, you're exposed to different things back then, you know, people smoking weed, you know, and I wasn't exposed to anything else. But, you know, in a group where they're smoking weed and they're passing it around, and I never did it for the fact that I have a sister. The reason I teach special ed is because of my sister, and she's severely disabled, and she was born that way, you know, and I always thought I never wanted to, you know, do anything that would, you know, hurt my brain or anything like that. So that's how I got my passion for teaching special needs. And now my other passion is for talking about addiction and trying to answer questions and, you know, try to paint a picture of who these people really are. You know, they're no different than anybody sitting right here.
I just wondered, just looking at the class, how many of you can say no when that's offered? How many can stand up and say no without that peer pressure? You know, and that's a valuable thing to be able to do that.
Yeah. And I'm sure most of you, or many of you, are headed for college another year or so, or this year.
How did you start teaching movements? Because I know some people, like, it's athletics, like, they start because they get injured. Like, how do you start?
He was approached in high school with an opiate, and he took it. And that's when he started. But you're right, there's a lot of people that get started. They're put on opiates, a lot of athletes. You know, they get injured, and they're put on opiates, and that's how their addiction gets started. You know, even if you get your wisdom teeth pulled out, sometimes that could be a time. So, you know, heads up, just, you know, keep that in your head. And my husband had knee replacement surgery, and of course, you know, they put him on pain medicine, and he took it. He goes, this doesn't do anything for me, but like somebody else, you know, gives them that high. So you just don't know, and you don't always want to find out. So if you don't have to, see if there's any alternatives. That would be the best thing to do.
Other questions? Is it, with these rehab centers, is this a cost prohibitive type of thing? Is there support by the federal government?
It's very expensive. And the other thing about rehabs, I'm glad you're bringing these questions up, is what makes me mad too is to get them into a rehab, sometimes there's a waiting list. So say today you want to decide, all right, I want to go to rehab. You call Glen Bay. You can't get in, you know, for maybe 3 or 4 days. But to get in, you have to piss dirty. And so you have to keep using until you get in, which is ridiculous. you know, just to be able to get into the rehab. I know, you know, I had insurance and it cost $1,200 for rehab for 30 days, but that's with insurance. Without insurance, I think it would have been like maybe 20,000 or something like that, which most people without insurance can't afford. I was telling them yesterday when Andrew went out to Colorado, my brothers all paid for it. It was $45,000 for 3 months. And, you know, no guarantees. I believe he got a little further at each step along the way, but it, you know, it caught up with them. So they are, you know, I know there's some in Cleveland too that you could go to, Salvation Army, that probably is not going to cost you an arm and a leg, but it's financially burdening to no end on the family.
Do you think there'd be a big difference between Salvation Army and Second Kings of Colorado, and having a difference in the price?
Definitely a difference in price. I think a difference in the environment, you know, as far as one of, he had an AA sponsor a while ago, a young guy, and he said, you know, you could get sober in a garbage can if you want to. It's how bad, you know, sometimes you want it. So I think you really have to be focused on wanting it, but, you know, again, your brain is so changed after doing all those drugs.
How many athletes in here? How many times has your coach said how bad you want it? Right? How bad you want it. It ties in with life too. Outside of playing baseball, basketball, football, whatever. How bad you want it. It's a tough thing.
Do you wish there was anything to change? Like, do you would go back and change or do differently?
I felt like, you know, we sent him to Glen Bay once, out Illinois once, Colorado. I was there for him. I tried everything I could. I mean, if it would have happened, if he would have overdosed and died in the beginning, I may have had more regrets. I feel like I did everything I could. Of course, you know, when he was living with me, I was always there to maybe catch him. But when you're 27, you've got to make those own decisions. And when he wanted to get off the Vivitrol shot, which is an opiate blocker he was on for 6 months, and when he wanted to get off the Vivitrol shot because he didn't like the way it made him feel, at first I went into the mama bear mode and said, well, if you go off that, then, you know, I'm not going to support you. And then he's like, well, you know. Then he came back and I said, well, he goes, how can you do that when this makes me feel so empty and I feel so horrible? And then I said, you know what? You're an adult. He's got to start making his own decisions. You know, you have your team of doctors. He was under the care of a doctor, a psychiatrist, a counselor. I said, you talk with them and you decide what's best, you know. But bottom line, you know, I always loved him, you know, and I know he always loved me, and that is truly the most important thing. And yes, you have to set boundaries, but the most important thing is the love. I've got a couple of things. Are there any other questions? And don't be shy. And I don't care if anybody wants to ever stop by and talk to me about anything. I'm down in room 99. And I would keep everything confidential. This is what my daughter wrote, who was very close to Andrew, for his eulogy. She says, Andrew would have lived 1,000,000 lifetimes of pure misery to prevent us from feeling this pain. He tried so hard to make it work here on earth. He always wanted to be the best person you wanted him to be, but he was hurting so deeply. Often it felt as though there were two sides to Andrew, one part beautiful and full of life, other part fighting to take it all away. Always someone here to save him, battling against God's will because we wanted to hold on to him so desperately. Perhaps that is selfish. Maybe he has a chance at peace now. Maybe he is better off in someone else's hands. There was no amount of love you could offer that he could feel and accept anymore. He could not find happiness here because he wasn't supposed to be here. Andrew was supposed to be an angel. In this dark time, we need to take the good with the bad and give thanks that we had been touched by Andrew's lovely soul. The first time God tried to take him from me, Andrew was unresponsive, but somehow managed to mutter, I love you, with what should have been his last breath. I am thankful for that. I am thankful for everyone that helped preserve Andrew's life. Maybe it was God's way of easing us into this tragedy. I am thankful for the most loving mother who never gave up on Andrew, even at his darkest hours. I am thankful today Andrew doesn't wake up sick or feeling empty inside. I am thankful for Andrew's highs and for his lows, for he was always genuine. I am thankful for the way he loved strong and deeply, especially his Marley. I am thankful for the way he fought for us with hope, so avoiding this. I will cherish his beautiful smile and his contagious laugh. I will take every moment we shared and take them to my last breath. May you finally be set free, brother. You were always my angel. You were always perfect to me. You will be missed deeply. You are loved forever. Your sister, Kate. I think she did a real good job about summarizing Andrew, how there were two sides to him. This really fun, loving, and then this other side that was so dark, which often you see. So Andrew had this on his Facebook page at one point, and I just wanted to share it. Those who died yesterday had plans for this morning, and those who died this morning had plans for tonight. Don't take life for granted. In the blink of an eye, everything can change, so forgive often and love with all your heart. You may never know when you may not have that chance again. Any other questions? You know, after reading that, knowing that was on his post, did he know? Sometimes I think, you know, I analyze everything. Did he know? He always said, he goes, I don't think I'm going to live a long life. And I thought, not the way he lived. I mean, he loved the sun. He'd go to the tanning beds. I mean, he was just like, you know, everything to the max. So